Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone. I'm Marie Harvey, Associate Dean for Research in the College of Public Health and Human Sciences at Oregon State University. And I'm pleased you're joining us today for this seminar. I'm also pleased to introduce Harold Bay, who is an assistant professor in our biostats program and in the College of Public Health. And he is going to join us today to introduce our speaker, to moderate the session, and Harold will tell us a little bit more about the format as well. So let's get started, and please join me in welcoming Dr. Harold Bay. Harold, you're on.
Sure. Well, thank you. Welcome to the Friday Research Seminar. We are very glad that you are here to join the CPHHS research presentation via Zoom. Just so you know, we have muted all of your microphones. So to ask a question, please use the Q&A feature in Zoom. We'll be moderating and repeating the questions for our audience today at the end of Dr. Sullivan's talk. So it will take a good 15 minutes to give you a full biographical information about Dr. Sullivan, as she has so many achievements. But in the interest of time, and not to take away any of her presentation time, I'll try to be really brief here. So Dr. Sullivan is currently the Associate Dean for Education at the School of Public Health at Boston University. She's Professor of Biostatistics and former Chair of the Department of Biostatistics. And as some of you may know, I graduated from BU while she was one of the professors, and it is really good to have her here today. Dr. Sullivan served as a PI of the Summer Institute for Training in Biostatistics, we call it SIPS, from year 2003 to 2015. And this program is designed to promote interest in the field of biostatistics, and it's many exciting career opportunities. And I remember being one of the TAs in this wonderful program when I was a graduate student. So Dr. Sullivan is also a co-author of a textbook entitled Introductory Applied Biostatistics, author of Essentials of Biostatistics in Public Health, and editor-in-chief of the Encyclopedia of Clinical Trials. Dr. Sullivan is a recipient of numerous teaching awards for excellence in teaching, including the Association for Schools of Public Health Pfizer Award for Teaching Excellence. She has expertise in many multidisciplinary research projects, including a variety of projects in cardiovascular disease and a large epidemiological study to assess the association between alcohol exposure in pregnancy and sudden infant death syndrome, studies to improve methods for prenatal diagnosis, and a clinical trial to improve repetitive behaviors in children affected with autism. Acknowledging that faculty are teachers, scholars, and community citizens, Dr. Sullivan notes that balancing multiple roles can be challenging, as you may know. In this presentation, she will discuss the pressure points and some strategies to overcome them. Again, welcome, Dr. Sullivan.
Thank you, Harold, so much. It's so nice to see you. And thank you, Marie, for inviting me. Marie and I go a long way back, so it's very nice to be here. So I'm going to share some slides. Let's see. Let me get into slide. Oops, that's showing okay? Everybody see my slides? Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the Teaching and Research Balancing Act. And what I thought I would do is first just outline some of our roles. And here I'm talking about our professional roles and responsibilities. We all do a mix of different activities. And then talk about some of the really long-standing challenges with systems for promotion and tenure. Some ideas for strategies to balance education and research. I wish I had the answers for you, but I'll just give you some ideas of things that you might do to try to balance these two aspects of your professional roles. And then just share with you some of my own personal experiences if they are helpful as you think about the ways to you are or might navigate your career. And what I really hope is that we'll have lots of time for questions and discussion. So as faculty, we have multiple roles. And I know right at this moment, our personal and professional lives are very much blurred, but hopefully soon we'll get back to a separation of those things. And as faculty, we are teachers, scholars, and community citizens. Many people think about their success on the faculty track as promotion and tenure. We here at Boston University, actually on the medical campus, which is School of Public Health, Medical School, and School of Dental Medicine, we don't have tenure, but certainly we think about our success as promotion up the ranks. So I would suggest, you know, as a way to stay on track, understand your promotion and tenure policies, procedures, and timelines. Talk to people who serve on that committee and get to know them, how they operate, how they implement and understand these policies and procedures. And I would urge you to get feedback on your progress regularly. Certainly we all have annual meetings with chairs, but get feedback from other mentors and ideally people who are on the promotion and tenure committee to give you feedback on how you're tracking along. As I mentioned at the beginning, there are lots of challenges and some longstanding criticisms with university promotion and tenure guidelines. And this is, I don't think, unique to any school or program. There are lots of complications with tenure. And as I said, we don't happen to have it, but many schools do, and it can work very well for people. Lots of people comment, maybe even criticize an overemphasis on research in the promotion and tenure process. And sometimes that focus is very narrowly defined. And, you know, that's just, again, understanding how your promotion and tenure group operate and what kinds of things they put weight on. And there's certainly lots of discussion. As I said, I'm Associate Dean for Education. So when I get to meet with my counterparts at other schools, we often talk about a lower emphasis on teaching and education as compared to research. And given all the complexities of the past year and how COVID-19 has disrupted everything in higher ed, I'm wondering and feel sort of optimistic that there's actually a refocusing on education. Lots of schools have spent much time, ours included, thinking about how we get our educational program back on track during this pandemic. And now we're thinking about how do we rebuild our program and do some new things post-COVID. And I think there's a real recognition about the importance of education for all that we do at universities. So back to thinking about, you know, your roles and what you do as a faculty member, I would ask you to think about how do you define success? So promotion and tenure is one thing, but I think we all have other ideas about what we would like to do, accomplish, and how we would like our professional career to unfold. And certainly work-life balance is important for all of us, and maybe especially so recently. But I would ask you to think about what motivates you in your professional activities. We all do lots of things: teaching, research, service, citizenship. And which of those things do you really like to do? Which of those things are you really good at? And where do you maybe struggle? And thinking about those things, I think thankfully, we all do a lot of collaborative work, and that's where you can strategically build your collaborative networks if you really understand the gaps that you need to fill to move your career forward. And then how can you optimize your productivity? Again, thinking about building your CV, building your body of work for promotion, tenure, and, you know, really to complete your own career trajectory in the way that you feel will best reflect your goals. So we're talking about sometimes is how do we balance teaching and research? And some people think this is a balancing act such that if we put more emphasis on one, then the other has to suffer. And I would argue that there are actually ways to combine research and teaching, and that they really aren't in conflict or in competition, but in fact, we can draw on synergies here that will move both of these activities forward. And I should say, for full disclosure, I really love teaching, and I have been fortunate enough to participate in lots of research projects, but my true love is teaching. And so what I've tried to do, and I'll share these details with you, is combine the two so that they actually, one promotes the other. So these are a few ideas for you that you might think about as you try to combine your teaching and research. So the first is, this is just obvious, but sometimes we have to really focus on these things. We have to manage our time. Time is finite, and especially in teaching, things always take longer, and we're having to learn new technologies all the time, particularly in this past year. We want our courses to be relevant and as authentic as possible, so that takes time. And so some strategies for time management are thinking about a particular task for an hour or two uninterrupted, rather than trying to do something and then responding to emails and other things that happen along the way. Blocking time in your calendar. I don't know if this works for all of you. I find this a very useful strategy for myself, where if I have something that I have to deliver on, whether it be to create a new class session or work on a research paper or do a talk, as soon as I put that event in my calendar, I block time leading up to it so that I can prepare and have things ready. And then always staying disciplined. You only have so many hours in the day, and you have to think about how you want to spend your time. And again, certainly time can get away from us, especially when we're working with students, which I think we all probably love to do because we work at a university, but we have to think about ways to do that efficiently. Things like advising appointments, maybe they can be done in small groups. Having students prepare for meetings with you, telling them in advance to come with specific questions. Again, these are just strategies that we can use to manage our own time so things don't get away from us. When you think about teaching, it is often a very isolated activity. Many of us maybe don't even know what our colleagues do once they walk into that classroom and close the door. And I would urge you to think about collaborating and networking around teaching. It's not something that we do typically. We collaborate extensively in research, but maybe not as much in teaching. And I would say that this can be a way to increase your efficiency in teaching. One, you can get ideas from other people, things that maybe you hadn't thought of that you can use very easily in your courses. And by sometimes talking through things that maybe work well for you, you can think about ways to update and reuse things that have been successful in your courses, maybe with just a little twist. Maybe it's someone else's idea that helps you to refine something that's worked well, but again, it's maybe a more efficient way to think about updating course components. Bringing your research into teaching. Think about your professional work as a mix of activities, not, okay, today is my research day, tomorrow is my teaching day, but all of these things can work well together. If you bring your research into your class, one, your passion will be evident to your students, and I'm quite sure it will motivate and engage them more in what it is you're talking about, because your passion will come through to them. Talking about some of your research, maybe things that you're even struggling with in your research, students may have ideas that you just didn't even think about. Students may be able to contribute to publications. I have colleagues who sometimes bring drafts of things, ideas of projects into class and use them in group activities for students, and they get good ideas and it helps them to move projects forward. Have students review manuscripts in progress. You know, are things clear to them? Are you relaying things in ways that are sensible to them? It might help you to produce a better product that, you know, gets more quickly through a review process. Administrative roles. So this is a big one, and I would ask you to think about whether you want to do administrative work. So I didn't put administration up as one of the faculty roles, even though it is a very important faculty role, because it's not for everyone. And I would here suggest that if you are interested in administration, and I'm certainly happy to talk much more about this, and I'm sure Marie has ideas on this as well, I would say be strategic. So if people approach you and invite you to consider an administrative role, you want to think about whether that role will actually help you get where it is you're going. Will there be an opportunity for you to publish, for you to build your CV, to advance in your professorial track with that administrative role? I have found in my own experience that most administrative roles take much more time than is originally advertised to me. So I would be, you know, cautious about taking on administrative roles too early in your career. And I think this is especially true for women sometimes, that they get asked to do administrative roles and they're very good at them, but it can sometimes delay their progress because they get involved in administrative work too early. And I've just seen it happen to some young women in my organization. And I think administrative roles can be very rewarding. I personally am very happy with the administrative roles I've had the privilege to participate in, but I didn't get involved until I had built some research networks, got my teaching, you know, sort of into a groove, and then I got engaged in administration. Focus on what you like and are good at. Again, I mentioned to you that I really like teaching, and you'll see in a minute, even in my research, I have tried to weave teaching into it, and I'll show you how. You want to create supportive and productive networks. So in working with people, in creating your professional networks, work with good people. Work with people who complement your strengths, who bring something else to the research or the teaching team. And I would encourage you on the teaching side of things to think about engaging in scholarship of teaching and learning. This is something that many of us in the profession are trying to promote, because there really hasn't been a lot of scholarship around teaching and learning in public health. And I think there are certainly some commonalities with teaching public health at a graduate level, even an undergraduate level. But I think there are also some unique features about teaching public health that we could contribute to the literature. And I would encourage you to think about publishing your ideas about teaching and learning and conducting research in your classrooms where possible. And then certainly we all have to take time to recharge. This past year has been difficult, and things that might have come much more easily before last March have been very, very difficult this past year. And so, you know, the expectations of faculty are very high, and it is important to always take time to recharge. And for many of us, that sometimes means focusing on more work, but things that you actually like to do. I think that's fine, but you also need to really take time to recharge. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the projects that I have had the great privilege to be part of, and some of the people that I have been able to work with and why they made a difference. And I use these really by way of example to try to illustrate some of these strategies that I mentioned. And, you know, hopefully we can talk about some of these things together after I finish just a few more slides. So as Harold said, I've had a couple of areas that I have been working in. Now, I'm a biostatistician, and biostatisticians who engage in collaborative work sometimes don't go too deeply into any particular content area. What's great about biostatistics and epidemiology, maybe to some extent, is, you know, you can focus on lots of different areas, but I had a couple of opportunities to work in projects that were looking at obstetrics and adverse pregnancy outcomes. And I mentioned a couple of projects here. The first one in the top left was looking at a clinical study comparing first versus second trimester screening for Down syndrome. And this was a project, it had a very narrow focus. The title sort of says what we were looking for, but it was a very productive network. There are a lot of people listed on that authorship list, but that was a strength of this work because they were all so passionate about the work that while this was the primary paper that came out of that study, there were many more, because the individuals who were involved were so very passionate about the work, and we put a lot of effort into collecting the data for this study. It actually resulted in many publications, which was really great for all of us who were involved in the study. And then I'll just talk about the paper at the bottom. This is looking at the association between prenatal drinking and smoking and increased risk for SIDS. And again, a big network of people involved in the study. And there are a couple of names that are actually on all of these three papers that I put up, because the people that, to me, made such a difference in the work are ones that I wanted to make sure that I always stayed aligned with, because they were always working on projects that were not only important for people's health, but they were so passionate, they were going to continue to do good work. And I wanted to be part of that. So I would just say, you know, if you find people that are super passionate about projects that are important to you, then stay with them, because they will always continue to be funded, and I think will be great collaborators for you as your career moves on. This next set of papers are completely different, and these are in cardiovascular disease. I've had the great privilege to be one of many biostatisticians working on the Framingham Heart Study. And I put up a couple of papers here just because these, the Framingham study was such a tremendous resource for all of us at Boston University. There are many faculty within the Department of Biostatistics and other departments as well who have had the chance to work on the Framingham Heart Study. And it's been a great study, not just for the faculty, but for many of our students to work on as well. And working with our students as they make their way through their graduate programs on a study like this has just been a tremendous opportunity for many of us to build substantial bodies of work. And it's done very collaboratively, so there's not an extremely high burden on any one person. And again, these papers that I highlight here, I had the opportunity to work with people who were just very, very passionate people and very productive people. And again, you want to build your networks with people who are productive. And you will find in your career, I'm sure, that you sometimes come across people who are not so productive, and where you have a meeting, everybody decides on what the next steps are, and you're the only one who does those next steps and comes to the next meeting. Those are not the kinds of collaborators you want. You want people who everybody takes the next steps and brings their work to the next meeting, and you move things forward. So I would just argue that you always keep your eye on what you're contributing, what others are contributing, and align yourself with people who are as productive as you are. And then these are examples of ways that I was able to bring my interest in teaching into research. And so these are papers that the top two were tutorials that were published in Statistics and Medicine. And what they were actually techniques that we were using in our research projects, where we could actually publish something that was helpful to other researchers to educate them on particular statistical topics. And so these, to me, were a good way to bridge my interest in research and in teaching. And again, publications to build your resume, but doing things that you like to do. And these were especially positive for me, just because I was able to use what my interest in education to further research for other people. And these publications, these tutorials are actually get a very, very large number of hits. You get a lot of citations on these kinds of papers. So Harold also mentioned our SIBS program, and I just mentioned this here because it was one of the greatest honors I had as a faculty member, was to lead our SIBS program. It's been continuously funded since 2003. And again, this for me was a way to combine my interest in research and education. It was a grant, and the mechanism actually had salary coverage for the faculty involved, and it was a teaching activity. So this was a perfect opportunity for me because of the teaching aspect, and I was able to say I was the PI of this project. So if you happen to be interested in education as I am, this kind of a mechanism, I think, is really great for you to build your profile as a principal investigator and also to stay involved in teaching. Now, this weird picture is my attempt to describe how my career has gone since I joined Boston University School of Public Health in the late 90s. And when I did, I was on our regular faculty track, if you will. It's what we call the unmodified faculty track. We have a research track where faculty are almost exclusively engaged in research. And then we have a clinical track. That's just the name that we use, but that's where people are much more engaged in teaching. But the unmodified track is where people have a mix of activities. And so when I came in, I was doing about 60% research and 30% teaching. And I didn't put it here because it wouldn't show very well. But then we had a fraction of our time dedicated to service. And over time, as you can see with the gray, I got much more involved in administration. And I really happen to like the administrative roles that I have had the chance to be involved in, but I would definitely say you want to be sure you've got, your networks lined up before you get too heavily involved in administration. Now, my role is a lot of administration and not so much research anymore. That was a very hard decision for me to give up or to make that shift, but I just felt like I had to do it. But what you can see is that my teaching has actually increased because it's It's always been an interest of mine, and it's something that I know I will always want to stay engaged with to some degree. So what unfortunately had to give for me was the research. But now my professional activities are primarily administration and teaching. And I consider teaching a great privilege and a great responsibility. And just another thing I'll show you is I have a few textbooks that I've been able to get involved with, again, because I like teaching, and this was a way for me to build my CV with some publications in the form of textbooks. And, you know, in biostatistics and in teaching public health, there's less competition than there is in other fields. And so if you're interested, you like writing, you like, you know, sharing this kind of work, then you might consider writing a textbook. And they don't have to be encyclopedias, you know, some of them can be quite concise, and you might get a lot out of doing that kind of work. So over your career, I hope that you have lots of opportunities, and I expect that you'll have lots of challenges. Certainly right now, the last year, we've all been presented with many challenges on the research side, on the teaching side, trying to manage professional and personal lives, trying to maintain some kind of balance. But I would say that challenges often present opportunities. So right now, as university systems are reimagining and reinventing themselves, think about where you fit. What role can you play as your university, your program changes? I think no programs, starting in fall, I hope, will look like they did before. But that's actually a positive thing. What can you do differently? Where can you take an opportunity to do something different as schools and programs are changing? And I'll just leave you with this last slide before we have a discussion. I just put this up because as you think about your career and interacting with people, I would say if a door opens, sometimes a window, sometimes it's only a crack, consider going through it. You know, look on the other side, see what might be there, take chances. And when you are in the position, if you can open the door for others, I would urge you to do so. So say yes to opportunities and try as best you can to open doors for your colleagues, particularly your junior colleagues, where you're able to. So I will stop there and hope that we can have a conversation together. And I thank you again for giving me the time to, I hope, get to meet a few of you through this conversation. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. So now we have the Q&A session. I will start with the first question, which is the only question at this point. But the question says, I really love the idea of integrating research into teaching. However, this is less feasible for GTAs as we have less say in course materials. With this in mind, do you have any specific suggestions for GTAs and how they can develop in this integration or this integration?
Can you tell me what a GTA is?
It's a teaching assistant, so it's a graduate student teaching, the course.
Well, I would say if you have ideas for your faculty member that you're working with, I would raise them. Because, you know, as faculty, we all struggle with time, and I think we'd all like to put more time into teaching. So if you are a teaching assistant and have ideas on how to improve course content, please do not be shy. I suspect that your faculty member would more than welcome ideas, even if I understand that you know, curricula are set, you're trying to achieve certain learning objectives, but there are many ways to do it. And I bet you have new and innovative ideas, and I would really encourage you to bring those to the attention of your faculty member.
Yeah. I have one question.
Sure.
So, I really do have a true passion for teaching, as you do, and I think the challenge that I face is that, as you already said in one of your earlier slides, is that when you get evaluated for your promotion and or tenure, there's a often heavier emphasis on research, and that's always the challenge for people like me, I think. What do you think is a way to promote the importance of teaching in this kind of evaluation from an, I don't know, administrative or institutional viewpoint?
Yeah, I agree that that is a long-standing issue for all of us. And so, I think many promotion and tenure committees, the faculty that serve on those committees are trying to apply the guidelines as best as they can. And often those guidelines are telling them to look for publications and impact. So I think it's on us to build some scholarship around education, for one. And if, like, the SIBS grant was perfect for me in that it was a grant and I was able to be PI of that grant, yet it was really education for me. And the other is, in your statement, you have the opportunity to, describe your body of work and the impact it's having. And I would not be shy about the teaching side of things. And honestly, I think if there was ever an opportunity, it is now, because universities have been struggling this past year to figure out how do they get their education back on track, because it is critically important to the work that we do. So I wish I had a better answer, but it's a struggle for all of us, and I just think we keep pushing on it. Marie, yeah.
So I'm going to say my question since I can. So Lisa, we recently had a survey that was done by our faculty senate for all faculty here at the university, and findings show that women are suffering more from COVID and the changes. Their research is suffering, and it's more so for women than men. And I think we're concerned about the long-term effects of that and the short-term, but I would enjoy hearing your thoughts on how can we promote helping our female faculty with juggling the many things that they're doing now and continue to have their research thrive.
Yeah, the same is true here. And we've had lots of conversations about what do you do? And, I don't have an answer for this. I did hear one of my colleagues in medicine, same issue there, was able to get an internal grant to offer some of the junior faculty, women in particular, some protected time to try to catch up on, to get some of those publications done that they've been working on. And I thought that was an excellent idea if people are able to do it. I think just recognizing that this time has been especially difficult for women with young children who are juggling lots of things, we've got to help them to connect to other networks, other research projects, connect with them even around teaching. How can we support each other? And this is a huge problem. And I think you're right, Marie, that it's not just it's not just difficult now, it's going to hurt people down the line in what are our professional careers. Yes, absolutely. Single fathers, young children. Yeah, anybody who has been especially impacted by this situation, it's going to hurt them for their career unless we intervene in some way.
So I have another question from the audience. It says, thanks for sharing your experience. Can you speak to how to find and benefit from the best mentors? especially for faculty in the various stages of their professional career, for helping navigating the competing roles, teaching, research, service, and administration.
Yeah, so again, I as a biostatistician, I've worked on lots of different projects because, you know, we can often jump in on various collaborative projects. I've stayed with projects where the people are the most productive. And so you can find out who are those people, you know, that certainly share your interests in your area of expertise. Who are the people that are most productive, and reach out to them and ask them if there's any opportunity for you to participate in any of the projects that they're doing, because those are the people that you want to be aligned with. In terms of teaching, again, you know, teaching has been a very isolated activity. At our school, over this past year, we've instituted we started weekly, that ended up being a bit much. Now it's every other week, teaching and learning series, very informal. There's no real agenda other than how's everybody doing, what's working and what's not working. You know, all of us have been trying new things. And I can tell you that has really helped people to partner around their teaching. And it's made them much more efficient in what they're doing, because instead of us all inventing the wheel, we're learning from each other. How do you do that particular thing? You know, what did you use that was effective? So I would seek out people who have been productive, network with people, ask questions, and be a good mentee. And what does that mean? That means you are an equal partner in that relationship. The relationship needs to work for both sides.
Can I ask you another question?
Yes.
So I just want to know a little bit more about your textbook writing experience. So, I know you wrote a few books, and actually, you know, the book called Essentials of Biostatistics and Public Health, we've used that as one of the textbooks for the undergraduate course here. And there was a good one. For me, it just feels so daunting to even start. How did you get involved in writing these books?
Yeah, well, I can tell you, I made a huge mistake when I first came to the School of Public Health, because I don't know, Harold, if you had if you know Ted Colton. Do you know Ted? Ted was one of the founding faculty members of the School of Public Health, and he was the first chair of biostatistics.
Yeah, I've heard of him, but I don't know him.
Yeah, he's actually, honestly, I think he's in his 90s now, and he's still on the faculty and comes in and does things. But anyway, when I first joined the department, you know, Ted hired me and knew I was very interested in teaching. And Ted had a very successful textbook called Statistics in Medicine. Ted then went on to develop the Statistics in Medicine Journal. And he said to me, you know, I need to do a revision of this book. Would you like to do it with me? And I was so afraid that I couldn't do it. I said, no, I don't think I'd like to do that at all. And that was a huge mistake because he had already developed it. So if someone, you know, maybe the best way to get started is work with other people. You know, is anybody doing something? Can you collaborate with somebody? Make it known that you want to write a textbook. I now know that you want to write a textbook, and so I will be in touch with you because I am in the loop with people who are writing certain things. And so if you want to do things, if you want an administrative role, you want to get involved in writing a textbook, you want to get involved in a research network, don't keep it to yourself. Talk to people, because someone will hear you and then help you to make that connection. But writing the textbook it's not easy. I'm not going to say, I mean, many of you may have textbooks. It's work. It takes time, but you know, the different publishers are very supportive and they help you to do that. So I just did it because, you know, really my interest in teaching, and I had a lot of materials after a certain point in time.
Do we have any other questions from the audience?
So can I ask the audience, what is your biggest challenge in balancing research and teaching? And maybe you can put it in the Q&A, or what's the biggest struggle? I know not all of you feel that it's an easy balance, because it isn't for any of us.
So, you know, I'm going to give some time for the audience. You know, how do you, so since we are biostatisticians, it's not the most, I mean, it's not the easiest kind of subject you can teach, right? Because it involves numbers and, you know, some formulas and, you know, things like that. How do you get students involved? Like, you know, there are, I mean, I try a lot of different things, but sometimes the materials are just dry. How do you get students get involved for these kind of courses?
Well, I think teaching biostatistics is a great subject to teach because, one, it's so important to many other things. And the way I try to do it is start every class with something that is relevant. And right now, if you're teaching, you name it, a chi-square test, you can find an article about a clinical trial on a COVID vaccine that has a chi-square test in it. And so that's what I would start with. I always try to bring in something that is relevant and hopefully of interest to the students. And I find that once you can connect to something they're interested in, the rest of it, you know, then they want to know, how was this really done? So I think the key to any kind of teaching is engaging students, and the hook is with something that is relevant and of interest to them. So I look at, you know, things that are in the news. Don't have to be scientific articles. In fact, it's almost better to just pull up something that comes from a news feed that talks about a topic that gives you a way to then get into, you know, what it is you're teaching them about biostatistics.
Thank you. We do have one more question from the Q&A. It says, how can we engage graduate students in our research when we have limited graduate programs in our field?
Yeah, so I guess all of our schools are different in the way that we can support and access graduate students. So we have graduate research assistantships for students, and that's how they are funded to be graduate students. Do you not have those same kinds of?
Yeah, we do. It's just that I think the question here is that we don't have a biostatistics program here. So we have a MPH with the concentration in biostatistics. Yeah. It's not the same as like a master's in biostatistics. And I believe this question is coming from one of the fellow biostatisticians. So yeah. Yeah.
That's difficult. Yeah, not having students at the level that you might feel that you need them. What we're finding here is that you know, our PhD students are on research grants. That's how they get funded. But our other students who are coming into MPH and other Master of Science programs are looking all the time for any experiences that they can put on their resume. And so I think if there's a way to create an experience for a student, even if it's not a formal research assistantship, where they can contribute in some way and build their skills, as long as it's evident to the student that they can put it on their resume, that might be sufficiently attractive to them that they will work with the faculty member. Now that obviously presumes that they have the skills to contribute too, which I just wouldn't know.
Right. Yeah, he says thank you.
Yeah.
So as you just talked about, your MPH students looking for opportunities.
Mhm.
I hear, I've had students like that where, they are looking for some of these experiences. And sometimes I offer them some projects they can work on. And of course, it was not a paid job, so it was like a voluntary research experience. And I have found that because it's not a paid job, they would start with a lot of passion, and then they kind of dwindle down, so that it ends up being kind of me wasting time as well. Because if they lose their passion or interest in the course of time, what can I do to motivate them then?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I get it. You don't, if you're not paying them, I certainly understand both sides of that. Is there any way at the beginning to, at the beginning, I'm sure there's a lot of excitement and motivation. Is there any way to have a very explicit conversation about expectations? So that if you start to, and make sure you both agree to what those expectations are, so that as you maybe see some interest dwindling in the middle of the semester, you can pull them back on track. I'm not sure about that unless there's some kind of, deliverable there, a paper or something like that. Again, there would be motivation on the part of the students certainly to complete it, but that is tough when you're, and the students obviously have many things that are competing for their time, just as we do.
Yeah. Do you have any other questions? Okay. Well, Lisa, thank you so much, and it was good to see you again.
Good to see you. Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I hope everybody stays safe and we get back to some kind of normalcy soon.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.